For this conversation, I'm pleased to welcome to Concordia's stage Deputy Secretary General of NATO, Mircea Geoanã, along with Concordia Leadership Council member, Chairman of KKR Global Institute, General David Petraeus. General Petraeus, over to you.
Well, thanks very much. Thanks for the invitation to be part of this. Thanks, Deputy Secretary General, for being with us. And allow me up front to thank you for what your country, Romania, did for the operations in Iraq and Afghanistan, which I was privileged to command, of course, in each case, and where Romanian forces played significant roles. And also thanks for what you're doing for the alliance that I was privileged to serve as a lieutenant, major, 1-star, 3-star, and 4-star general over the years. Welcome, sir.
So good to be with you again, dear General. You're a legend in the world, and you've done so many things for your home country, the United States, for us as an alliance, and we are counting on you in any possible way also in the future. So thank you so much for,
thanks.
for the opportunity to meet again and engage.
Thank you. I could say the same about you, actually, given all of your positions as the president of your Senate, the Minister of Foreign, you name it, ambassador to the United States, and so forth. But now, of course, you are the Deputy Secretary General, where, among other things, you oversee the NATO partnership program. And so let's begin. NATO has had partnerships with countries and regions throughout the world since 1994. Since then, and all along these years, however, there's only been one partner in Latin America and the Caribbean, and that's Colombia, a country with which many of us in the U.S. have had strong professional and personal ties. But nonetheless, why Colombia and why just Colombia?
Yes, as you well know, NATO has developed a network of partnerships all over the world. We have very strong partnerships and well-established partnerships in the Asia Pacific. To give you an example, just today, when the foreign ministers of NATO had their regular meeting, on the discussion they had on China, other than the 30 NATO foreign ministers, we had partners like Sweden, like Finland, like the EU, and also Australia. So we have developed a number of partnerships in Europe with non-NATO European countries. I mentioned Sweden and Finland, Ukraine, Georgia, Moldova, the Gulf, the Middle East. We have been approached by Ghana to become the first sub-Saharan, hopefully new partner of NATO in the near future. So what we do, we are not just going proactively to seek global partnerships everywhere. We also reciprocate to the interest of nations, number one, that are sharing our values, that have a strategic relevance and importance in the world. And Colombia has come towards NATO. We first started our partnership in 2013 with Colombia. In 2017, we entered an upgraded version of our partnership, what we call Individual Partnership and Cooperation Program. And for the time being, we have been developing an impressive area of programs. Colombia has been an impeccable contributor to global security. They took part in NATO's Ocean Shield of the Horn of Africa. They've been part of the UN missions in Western Sahara, Central African Republic, or the Lebanon. They have been, unfortunately, being a nation where it has its own peace process, and we also have to learn here reciprocally, if you want. And what I believe the Colombia has done, and we responded, of course, very positively. They know that NATO is the gold standard when it comes to national security and defense establishments. And when NATO comes, it brings a level of expertise, of sophistication, of credibility, of depth, which is not only professional in terms of military or other aspects of national defense, but also principles, democratic values. And this is where I believe politically and practically we are doing now with Colombia. I'm just quoting from my notes here. intelligence sharing, cyber cooperation, maritime cooperation, fight against terrorism, fight against corruption, building integrity. We also have established a demining center in Colombia where other South American nations are interested in participating. And to be honest, my first participation at the Concordia summit is also an opportunity to engage and thank Colombia, but also speak to a broader audience all over Latin America, because I believe that NATO, as the world is moving in very complex directions, the more partnerships we have with like-minded nations all over the world, including more partners, eventual partners, if they have an interest in Latin America for NATO, would be good for us, would be good for them, would be good for stability and security all over the world.
I strongly endorse that, and I really, truly couldn't agree more. As you know, in fact, the coalition in Afghanistan is the largest fighting coalition that's ever been assembled in history. And it included, obviously, a number of countries that are non-NATO coalition partners. And, of course, countries that have participated in many other NATO activities than those just in Afghanistan, and also many United Nations activities, as you noted, is the case with Colombia. So clearly there is a lot of value in this, and Colombia does bring a great deal of professional expertise and experience, again, having partnered with them over the years as a military officer, and then certainly as the director of the CIA as they countered insurgents and illegal narcotics trafficantes and so forth, and did admirable work in those regards. But I guess the question is there genuine interest beyond Colombia in Latin America and the Caribbean in the NATO partnership program?
As you mentioned, General Petraeus, Secretary General Stoltenberg asked me to give, I'm a former politician, so I bring also, if you want, the political sensitivity and understanding of the way in which NATO should engage politically, and then, of course, more professionally, various nations all over the world. And he asked me to deal with partnerships, as you mentioned. He asked me also to chair the innovation board in NATO. He also asked me to look into NATO EU and NATO other international organizations relationships, UN, OECD, OAC, and many, many others. So when we are approaching Latin America, we do it with the spirit of engagement. Here in Brussels, we are talking regularly already with a number of Latin American ambassadors that are accredited or not also towards NATO. Brussels is a major diplomatic capital. Almost every nation in the world has a representation towards the EU, of course in Belgium, bilaterally, but also some of them are doing this also with respect to NATO. And also I think Colombia's first, let's say, partner in Latin America is also, I think, an encouragement for other nations in Latin America to follow suit, even for curiosity. Why is Colombia so interested in NATO? What is NATO bringing to Colombia? We mentioned a few. You know this firsthand from your previous experiences, that NATO also brings, speaking of funding for terrorism, speaking of other, let's say, powers, state or non-state actors. You see also some of the radical movements and terrorist movements in the Middle East and this part of the world also trying to find safe haven in that part of the world. And of course, US and Canada, they're also members of the organization American States. So we have NATO is a transatlantic alliance. It is not our intention to become a global alliance per se, but as you mentioned in Afghanistan, we basically coalesced a global coalition of like-minded nations having a common interest. So we are talking to a number of Latin American countries here in Brussels. It is my intention, as soon as we can travel, and hopefully the next Concordia summit or for a different occasion, I would like to visit Colombia and eventually have a tour around the region, exploring, let's say, other nations that might be interested. And to say something, not everything should really reach the level of a structured partnership with NATO. There is a la carte, it's a menu of things. I believe that every single nation in Latin America that wants true professional military, they could send a few of their young officers to the NATO Defense College or in Germany, or we can do an ad hoc training program for them. So if some of them would like to like Colombia, to really reach a fully fledged partnership program with us, it's perfect. We'll encourage that. But even not at that level, I think interactions, knowing how we think about the world, knowing how our doctrines are evolving, knowing how we are perceiving the threats when it comes to pandemics or terrorism or climate change or cyber or technology, the rise of China, all these things. I think there is an interest for a dialogue, which is in essence political, and then according to the needs and specific decision-making processes, which we fully respect in those countries. But to tell you officially, we are interested in expanding our network of relationships and hopefully partnerships also in this very important part of the world.
Well, that's very heartening to hear, frankly. Again, as the commander in Afghanistan, you'll know well that we had many non-NATO countries, and not just Australia from the Asia Pacific, but also New Zealand. We had Singapore. We actually had several commissioned officers from Singapore, the most highly educated officers I think we had in the entire staff of the International Security Assistance Force in Afghanistan. And all of them were there both to contribute and also, as you noted, to improve their professional expertise by being involved in a coalition of nations that all support that kind of approach. You noted that there are concerns beyond just the security concerns, beyond just those of, say, that we see in an era of renewed great power rivalries, as the saying goes. And these are in cyber and now what are termed hybrid threats that seem to be a growing concern in Latin America and elsewhere, but especially there because of their destabilizing impact on democracy. What is the value that NATO has to offer to the region in this regard?
Listen, we are basically, as NATO, we have been founded 72 years already, and we are considered by everybody, including by our rivals, the most successful alliance in the history of human mankind. Mm-hmm. And I think the first pitch, if you want, that I would make is what made this alliance so successful. It was not only because we had North America and Europe coming together, but also because we have put together, I would say, the indispensable mix of ingredients of a lasting, enduring, and successful alliance. Number one is our values. Yes. And coming from Romania, I mentioned Romania. I lived, half of my life in the dark years of communism. I cannot tell you how tough it is, and how much we appreciate to breathe the air of liberty. And I think all democracy-loving nations around the world should look at us, at NATO, not only as a military, operation, superbly equipped, exceptionally agile, always transforming itself, and having always an edge in defense and military terms, but also as an alliance of democracies. And this is the first ingredient of our success. And this is something I believe we should continue to engage even more forcefully with like-minded nations from all over the world, including in Latin America. The second ingredient that we always had, and this could be and should be of interest to our friends and potential partners from all over the world, is that we always kept our technological edge and our agility and adaptability is part of our DNA. So I think everybody would benefit. We would benefit in NATO, and our potential partners and friends from all over the world, including Latin America, would benefit from just exchanging views or how we see the world moving forward, exchanging best practices in cyber defense. NATO, by the way, just our leaders in London in December 2019 decided that space, the outer space, is the new operational domain for NATO. we are looking into this very seriously. 5 years ago, our leaders discussed about cyber, and we have an active cyber policy. I'm also giving you another, let's say, very, very dominant topic that I think we should engage with partners and like-minded nations from all over the world. This is resilience. In a sort of anticipation of our leaders, 5 years ago, at the Warsaw NATO summit, the NATO leaders decided to instruct us as an organization to look into what we call baseline requirements for resilience, from energy security to infrastructures to civil military cooperation in case of disasters or conflict, and look how much resilience is on everybody's minds. We have upgraded our resilience, including on telecom, 5G, all these issues. So if I would be putting values, permanent adaptation, and also foresight of things that are to come, I cannot see a better organization than NATO, and not because I'm working temporarily in this great organization and I enjoy every second of this, but I think we can benefit from each other. Look how much the briefings that Colombia brings to NATO. The foreign minister of Colombia was just a few months ago, before the pandemic, he visited with us. We also respect very much what President Duque is doing in terms of his regional and national leadership. So what I'm just saying is not just to make a commercial pitch to anybody. I'm just saying that we are an exceptionally important organization, and being part of a conversation with us is mutually beneficial for us. We learn a lot, as you learn from Colombia, many things that we are not always that aware in the minutiae and the complexity of the situation, but also those nations can learn and benefit from what we do. And we are ready to share, and we are ready to engage even more actively in this global partnership mechanisms.
Well, I couldn't agree with all of that more or applaud all of that more, frankly, again, as one who truly believes enormously in NATO. Perhaps just as a last question, and revisit something that you've touched on a bit, but this is the area in which NATO and Latin America and the Caribbean share security and defense threats as we look around the world, as we are again in an era of renewed great power rivalries, as we see Iran trying to make inroads in Latin America and the Caribbean. What are the shared threats that NATO might be able to help the Latin America region with, and also, frankly, that Latin American countries might be able to contribute to NATO's knowledge in as well?
Listen, I believe we can benefit, and these countries can benefit from our expertise when it comes to fighting terrorism. We have exquisite competence, and many countries, unfortunately, including the host country of this great conference, are still confronted with this threat. We have developed a tremendous experience on resilience and fighting pandemics.
Yes.
We are ready to share how we look disruptive technologies impacting on national security and how these technologies can be used and sometimes abused when it comes to cyber. We have great expertise on disinformation and how to combat that. In fighting corruption and building integrity, and we cherish this program with Colombia, that they are very active in this. It's very important for the citizenry to retain and build trust in the institutions of national security in each of our countries. Climate change, great power competition, the rise of China, you mentioned Iran. These are challenges that are affecting all of us, and I think being together, this is also very, very important. Also, it's a two-way street, as I mentioned earlier. We learn a lot on how various actors, state and non-state actors, are trying to use sometimes the power vacuum that is existing, and unfortunately still exists also in Latin America, how they insidiously penetrate areas that sometimes is not on our radars. We are a transatlantic organization. So when we are talking to our friends in Colombia and partners in Colombia and to other countries in Latin America or Asia or Africa or the Middle East, we are also learning a lot, and this exchange of information between professionals, between politicians, also between young people. Because let's say something, sometimes there is a prejudice when it comes to NATO. There is some form of misunderstood meaning of what this alliance is. This is a political military alliance based on democracy, on values, on transparency, on accountability, on interoperability. And this is again something that I believe we can share. And I just cannot say how much I would love to see more cooperation between NATO and of course Colombia, as I mentioned, is a very, very precious partner of NATO, but also engaging with the broader region. I think it's win-win. And also, as the new U.S. administration is coming in, listen how much President-elect Biden is speaking about reviving alliances. He's not referring only to NATO. Of course, the European transatlantic alliance system is essential for world stability. But I think President-elect Biden is also speaking about alliances and partnerships all over the world. And I think this is also another encouragement from, let's say, from a meta level for us to come together, to create more synergies, and also to be able to shoulder challenges together. And we are ready to engage and ready to partner with nations that would like to see NATO becoming, let's say, more. And also, we customize. There's not one size fits all. So that's I'm encouraging countries that have an interest in looking to what we offer to come to us, to ask their ambassadors in Brussels to come to see me. I will receive them unconditionally as soon as they would like to see me and my colleagues here in NATO. And we're ready to if you want to customize, first a small program, 2, 3, 4 items. You build trust, you build confidence, you start to know. Look at Ghana. I mentioned Ghana again because I really like the way in which they presented themselves. They came to see me 1 year ago, almost 1 year ago, and 1 year after, we are very close in having the first sub-Saharan partner, which was probably unlikely. Why they come to us? Because they are concerned of the spillover risk from the Sahel in terms of terrorism and the Horn of Africa, where Colombia was taking part in that NATO operation. So this is how geographies are sometimes ubiquitous when it comes to global challenges. And this is where I believe our door is open, and we like to engage. We'd like to engage with nations that have an interest in at least knowing what we do, and eventually building a solid, forward-looking and forward-leaning partnership down the road.
Well, Deputy Secretary General, thanks so much for being part of this virtual gathering. I hope that we can both be in Bogota next year when Concordia gathers everyone there for the traditional type of conference that we have held in the past. It has been great to have you join this particular virtual event. And I want to end by thanking you not just again for what your country has done and what you have done for your country, but also for what you are now doing for the greatest alliance in history, and hoping that there will indeed be more members of the partner program from Latin America and the Caribbean to join the great country that is already a partner in it, Colombia. Thank you again, Deputy Secretary General.
General, thank you for your leadership, and I'm looking forward to visiting Colombia, also to be seeing you eventually in the US or in Europe whenever you travel. You have friends not only with me, but with the whole NATO universe. You're a hero for us, and thank you so much for sharing this virtual stage with us. And Kevin, I know you're nervous. I know you're nervous to get to the next one. So
I've got to keep things moving, but this was such a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much, Deputy Secretary General, and thank you, General Petraeus.